Yesterday, something really interesting happened. But first, recently, Musk has been in the news battling it out in a courtroom with OpenAI. If you've been paying attention, you've probably heard something about this. There's animosity between Musk and Altman over the way OpenAI started versus how they've grown, and specifically surrounding the upcoming IPO. But I won't get much into that. The point is, he's been openly hostile to Sam Altman for months. So when I saw yesterday's news, I actually had to read it twice. Musk just handed Anthropic, OpenAI's largest competitor, his Memphis data center, 220,000 NVIDIA GPUs. That's a serious amount of raw processing power available within the month. And Musk posted publicly that the Anthropic team impressed him. It's an amazing deal, fantastic for Anthropic, but the deal is actually the least interesting part of what's happening right now. In the last 60 days, Anthropic signed compute deals with Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Fluidstack, and now SpaceX. The total committed spend is somewhere north of $200 billion. That's a lot. We all know the numbers are insane. And they've flagged interest in developing orbital compute capacity in actual space. This isn't a company patching a capacity problem. This is a company making a bet, a very large bet. So I want to walk you through what that bet actually is and why it matters for anyone building on top of their models. To understand why this is significant, you need to know where Anthropic was a year ago. 12 months ago, they were a well-funded AI security safety company with strong models and a credibility problem. Not in regards to their product, it was a compute issue. Claude was good, but infrastructure to serve at scale wasn't there yet. Users were hitting rate limits constantly. Sound familiar? Enterprise customers were running into reliability issues at peak hours. They actually put out a statement acknowledging the strain. That's unusual. Most companies don't admit their infrastructure is struggling, but Anthropic did, and it accelerated everything you're about to see. Fast forward to today, their annualized revenue run rate just crossed $30 billion. That's up dramatically since the end of 2025. They tripled in roughly 12 months. Claude Code alone hit $2.5 billion in revenue by February, doubled from $1 billion just months earlier. For context, that's a product that barely existed 2 years ago. So demand exploded, and the infrastructure couldn't keep up. Strong models, constrained delivery. Clearly, they had to do something about this, which is exactly what they've been working towards. Right now, Anthropic is making deals all over the place, and it's a really interesting thing to watch. Google and Broadcom, 5 gigawatts starting 2027. $200 billion committed over 5 years. That's $40 billion a year, every year to just one supplier. Anthropic spend alone reportedly accounts for 40% of Google's entire cloud backlog. That's a dependency on both sides. Amazon up 5 gigawatts, nearly 1 gigawatt by the end of 26, a separate multi-layer deal. AWS Trainium chips. That's what Anthropic is reserving from Amazon alone by the end of the year. Microsoft and NVIDIA, $30 billion in Azure capacity. A strategic partnership, not just a procurement agreement. Anthropic is running across Azure infrastructure as part of this. Fluidstack, $50 billion in US AI infrastructure. Less talked about than the others, but it is enormous. Fluidstack runs distributed GPU infrastructure. This gives Anthropic capacity that isn't tied to a single provider. SpaceX Colossus, 300 megawatts, 220,000 GPUs, essentially available now. This is the one announced yesterday, May 6th. And critically, it's the only one that delivers compute immediately. Everything else is later in 2026 and 2027. Colossus 1 is online within the month. That's why Claude Code limits doubled yesterday. That's why Opus API rate also went up. The orbital compute interest alone is monumental. Anthropic flagged it directly in their announcement. They've expressed interest in partnering with SpaceX to develop multiple gigawatts of compute capacity in space. It's an important signal, and it would put them at the forefront of something entirely new. This may or may not affect you, but it is incredibly interesting territory. Anthropic believes demand for Claude is going to dwarf what they can currently serve. You don't commit massive amounts of money unless you're modeling demand that justifies it. The math only works if Claude usage grows by multiples from here. That's actually good for builders. More capacity means more reliable access. Limits going up yesterday is the first evidence of that, and there's a lot more capacity coming online through the rest of 2026. There is, however, a less comfortable implication underneath that. When Anthropic locks in these massive deals, they're tying their infrastructure to specific providers for years. That means if you're building on Claude, your vendor's reliability and pricing are now partially a function of Google Cloud's infrastructure decisions. That's a dependency worth understanding. The second thing about the story tells you about the Musk angle. Musk isn't necessarily warming up to Anthropic, he's just anti-OpenAI. Anything that strengthens credible OpenAI competitor is strategically useful to him. He just handed Anthropic the usage of his Memphis data center. Anthropic's side is just as pragmatic. They took the deal because they need the compute. This doesn't show alliance or friendship. In the infrastructure race, nobody's competing on principles right now. They're competing on raw processing power, GPUs, and energy. And the deals being made to secure those things are stranger than you'd expect. Anthropic is making a bet that the cost of not having enough compute is higher than the cost of the deals they're signing. The demand and the constraint are very real. The deals are the answer to a problem they can see clearly, even if the numbers look absurd to us on the outside. But zoom out and you're looking at something that goes beyond Anthropic. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Oracle now have a combined $2 trillion in cloud revenue backlog. And Anthropic and OpenAI account for more than half of it. 2 AI companies, more than $1 trillion in committed spend between them, backstopping the infrastructure ambitions of the 4 largest cloud providers on the planet. This is where my mind goes next. The infrastructure required to run frontier AI at scale is so expensive and so concentrated that a handful of companies are now structurally load-bearing for the entire cloud industry. And if you're building in the space, you're building on that stack. Now, I'm not trying to be alarming, but if you're building this space, I just think people need to think about it more. The rate limits going up yesterday are good news, but the dependencies underneath them are worth knowing and thinking about. So if you're building in the space right now, does your architecture have a fallback if something changes? The next question that comes to mind is what connects directly to the energy and power angle I've been tracking and we're all wondering about. What does this level of compute build out actually cost the grid? We're talking about data centers that consume as much electricity as entire states. Let me know if you're interested in hearing more on that topic. If you want vendor moves and infrastructure shifts flagged before they hit you directly, that's what this channel is for. Subscribe. That's it for this video. I will see you in the next one.